Today on The Future of Everything, the future of photography and artificial intelligence. Photography is one of my favorite topics, and it has a great and momentous history. It was invented in the 1820s when somebody figured out for black and white photography that chemical processing of silver halide particles led to light sensitivity and the ability to record film. Importantly, it exploded when it was brought to the masses, if you will, by Eastman Kodak, which made cameras that were available to everybody. And that's why we have pictures of our great-grandparents and great-great-grandparents from perhaps even the turn of the last century. Another major cataclysm happened when color photography became routinely available, first to the studios in the 1930s, but then again within 10, 20 years to regular people, and there was an explosion of color photography. I think it's definitely a cataclysm that in the 1970s, digital photography emerged, ironically out of Eastman Kodak, who didn't think it was a winner. And that led directly to what we have today, which is almost all of us having a smartphone with a high-resolution camera in our pocket. Now, of course, there's our ability to manipulate photographs with computational methods, but there's also the issue of which photographs we should look at. How do we search for them? How are they brought to our attention? Pamela Chen is a J.S. Knight Journalism and Human-Centered Artificial Intelligence Fellow at Stanford University. Before coming to Stanford, she worked as a professional photographer and editor for National Geographic and spent time at Instagram as well as that social media platform exploded. Pamela, you have spent your life with photography. How is it changing, and how do these changes affect photographers?
Well, thanks so much for having me and for that question, Russ. So I guess I can start by saying, as an editor for National Geographic, so much of what we do was thinking about pictures, about how to make them, what they mean, how people are going to perceive them, what they should look like in print. And when I was at National Geographic as an editor, one of the new emerging technologies that came out at the time was Instagram. And so when we launched the Instagram account for National Geographic in 2012, it quickly became a new experiment of how people were consuming pictures, but also how photographers were thinking about posting them.
Now, can I ask you right there, excuse me for interrupting, but so National Geographic is an icon of photography. It's one of the reasons I'm ridiculously excited to be talking to you. Instagram was not any kind of icon, especially in 2012. So how does this giant of photography, a respected source and at the highest quality, how does it decide that it's time to set up an Instagram account, whereas you could have easily said, that's not for us. We are high quality professionals, and that's a bunch of people with their cell phones. Like, what were those conversations like? Was it an obvious decision or was it a risky decision? Can you take us a little bit through that?
Sure. I think one thing that's important to realize or to remember, is that back in 2012, Instagram was not the household name that it is today. It was quite small, it's very young, and there weren't that many brands or influencers or anyone like that on the platform yet. And so for National Geographic, one of the decisions, it wasn't that it would compete or be as prolific as part of their identity as it is today. It was merely a place where photographers could share their journey. It became kind of a dispatch from the field, something a little more casual. One of the early ideas that we had when we launched the account was that the photographers could write their own captions and just share with people who were following where they were, what they were thinking, kind of a behind the scenes look at what it
I see. And so there was going to be the high quality that we all know of National Geographic, and this was kind of going to be kind of like an under the hood.
A little bit under the hood. And at the time, I think it was iPhone 4 or 5 was the phone that you could use. So the quality of the picture itself was a completely different game. You know, I think it was much, much smaller. It was square.
Yes.
And so the entire creative process was a little bit different.
Okay, so thanks for allowing that interruption. So that was kind of the mindset, and then how did it go? What was the natural history of this experiment? And I know it impacted your life in terms of where you spent time and what you got interested in.
Yes, absolutely. And so very quickly into this process, photographers would start telling me, oh, I will post this picture because this one will do well.
Hmm.
And what did it mean for a picture to do well? And on the surface, I think it became a kind of a shorthand for getting more likes and comments than another picture. So for example, a baby animal may be a picture that people would think this will do well. But already this perception of doing well was starting to shape our creative choices in a way that was kind of new. And it felt like this new level of self-filtering had been unlocked.
Yes. What was the do well mandate? Did that come from the photographers who just wanted to have their stuff appreciated, or did it come from management who said, you know what, these pictures are driving traffic to our site, or they're increasing subscriptions, or whatever, or was that more of a personal kind of goal that was implicit among the photographers?
Well, back then, there wasn't really something called a social media manager per se full time. You know, I was an editor for the magazine, and we were just really experimenting with building community around a shared love of photography. So the followers were mostly interested in the same things that the photographers were interested in, which is the making of photography. And this idea of doing well kind of creeped up, I think. It was something that I didn't totally realize was going to be such a powerful influence on my own journey. And I actually didn't understand what it actually meant to do well on Instagram until I joined the platform later on.
Yeah, so tell me about that, because that must have been a big decision, and I think you got there at a very momentous time. So can you take us from I'm an editor at arguably the premier photographic uh, media journal magazine in the world, and now I'm going to go to this other totally different thing?
Yeah, and I think my first job at Instagram was to run the @Instagram account for Instagram.
Yeah, that's very meta. So that's you're doing Instagram for Instagram. So there's a little pressure there, right? Because you're supposed to be the alpha user who knows exactly how to play this violin.
Yeah, and in those days, I was one of the first 100 employees, and what was amazing about the Instagram account on Instagram and what drew me there was that it was this spotlight on real people who were using their accounts in creative ways. And so every day we would surface accounts that you may not know existed, but actually might love to follow.
So were you one of the first influencers?
We certainly met some of the first influencers.
Yes.
And I mean, one of the amazing things about being there was that we had a front row seat to how photography was changing in people's lives. And one particular moment is actually, I didn't know it at the time, but what brought me to Stanford eventually, many years later.
So this must have been quite a moment with ripple effects. This is Russ Altman. I'm speaking with Pamela Chen, and we're talking right now about a momentous moment that happened at Instagram that changed at least Pamela's life, if not many of our lives. What was it?
So I'm talking about this, well, there are many moments, but the one in particular that I have been studying is this transition in social media where everyone went from seeing the same thing at the same time to each of us seeing a personalized prediction of what we might want to see. And what I'm talking about is the introduction of machine learning in the form of content ranking algorithms around 2015. This is much more commonly known today as recommender systems in AI.
And these are the kinds of systems we also see at Netflix and Amazon. And how would you to somebody who's not in the business, how would you characterize what a recommender system does?
Well, so one way to think about it is before these systems were introduced, the idea of going viral or getting your content seen in social media was a lot more straightforward and in some ways a little more difficult. Like the usual proxy for reaching a lot of people on social media before algorithmic recommendation systems was essentially to have a large account like the @Instagram account, repost your content and direct people to your account. After the advent of these algorithms, it meant that every person was seeing a different set of images, and however you reacted to those images would signal to the machine that you might want to see more of those pictures.
Yes, and I'm very aware of that, because when I use my own Instagram, I actually think twice before I like something, because I know that I'm going to get more of that. And so I have to ask, do I really, really like it, or do I just kind of like it? Because if I say I really like it, then I'm going to see a lot more of this. I do love puppies, by the way, but for some other things, I'm interested in it, but I don't really want to see any more of it. And so I don't know if I'm playing games with myself or with the algorithm. But it definitely is a thing, and it definitely affects the user experience.
Yes, and one of the things that I became increasingly aware of is that it would affect what you're describing as the consumption experience, but it was also deeply affecting the creator experience.
Yes. So tell us about that.
Yeah, in the beginning, I think when, the algorithm, as it was called, creators didn't really like it very much. You may remember the Bring Back Chronological campaign.
When life was simple and last in, first out type algorithm.
Absolutely. And it was often viewed as this monster. And so, all these articles came out like how to beat the algorithm or how to get around it or how to hack it. But the reality of how that works is much more nuanced.
So, okay, so now we have these creatives who their world had now changed twice. There was the good old-fashioned day before the internet and before all of their images were on the internet, and there was you got a good job at a magazine, you got republished in high-profile places, and that was doing well. And then doing well was a more complicated thing, as you described, with the chronological, and then getting reposted by somebody who has a lot of followers. And now there was, I guess, a distinct loss of control. Is that a fair way? Where even when you have work that you're perhaps very proud of, that you think is great, it's a little bit of a dice roll whether it will do well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think quickly the term "the algorithm" became the scapegoat for that feeling of loss of control. But when we say the algorithm in the context of social media, we're actually talking about these recommendation systems that are powered by machine learning.
Yes.
And so today we're training this algorithm every time that we tap something, don't tap on it, comment, share, follow. And enough successful predictions by the algorithm and our content effectively goes viral.
Yes.
And that's actually what it means to do well in the age of algorithms.
So are there people who figure it out better than other people?
Yes, there are. And that's actually one of the questions that brought me here to Stanford. What I was starting to realize was that the artist's perception of the algorithm was becoming a more powerful influence on what they were doing, maybe more than the actual power of the algorithm, if that makes sense. And one challenge would, for example, if you only share what you think will do well, you're actually creating a pretty one-dimensional data set. And ironically, this is the only data that the algorithm has to learn from.
So could lead to homogenization of content. Yes.
Or these bubbles where we're actually, in some ways it becomes a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy that maybe none of us really wanted. We're collectively creating this world because we're reacting to what we think it already is.
Yes, yes. And I could see that would be very frustrating to the creatives, the people creating the content, because they want to explore new areas, they want to do experimental things, but if an experimental thing dies on the vine immediately, there's very little incentive to do any more of it, especially if you're paid or your professional status is related to your ability to go viral. And I could see that it would be extremely stressful and anti-innovation in some way. So can you explain this to the technologists? Do they listen and do they change their algorithms? Or do they like, Pamela, sorry, life is tough. We have the algorithm. We will tweak it, but we're not really asking you for your advice.
Well, I don't think it's so black and white like that, actually, Russ.
That's good news, actually.
Yeah, it's great news. And I think that it's important to realize that every product change at the scale that we are talking about right now, the Instagrams and the TikToks of the world, every product change has the potential to shape human creativity at a massive, massive scale. And we talk about the algorithm kind of in pop culture in reference to Instagram, but in reality, these algorithms are helping us sort through content, from streaming services to search results, and so many arenas in between.
Yeah, so you make an important point that although we have these potential concerns about innovation and homogenization, it really is not optional, because with the number of images that are being posted, we all need help. We all need an assistant to say, Russ or Pamela, here's the pictures that I think you need to look at today if you want to look at pictures. So what's your sense of how this should go?
Well, how should it go? So many thoughts around that. What these algorithms are doing is they're trying to solve a problem for us, like you're saying. How does a user like you or me find anything in the trillions of images that are being posted every day? Recommendation systems are surfacing suggestions to us, and it's guessing and it's learning. Based on what we might like, what we do to the picture, it will show us more and more of those things. So it's creating these worlds for us. It's almost like, do you remember Blockbuster?
Blockbuster Video, love it.
So when I would go to Blockbuster, one of my favorite areas was the staff picks shelf.
Oh yeah, I forgot about those.
Yeah, and so, if you weren't sure what movie you wanted to watch on a Friday night and you were browsing the aisles, you could go to the staff pick shelf and you could see, the employees share kind of their top 5 favorite movies. And they would mostly be by genre. So if you like this horror movie that this employee liked, maybe you like this other one that you might not have seen.
Right.
And so that kind of like human curation layer over this like kind of content pool helped you kind of quickly pick out something that you might like based on what you've seen in the past.
Yes.
This space is not so different right now in all of these content platforms. There's so many experiments being run every day on this balance of when is a human eye the right solution, and when is it that actually we need to rely on recommendation systems to help us curate the content that we see.
This is Russ Altman. We'll have more with Pamela Chen on AI, going viral, and photography next on Sirius XM. Welcome back to The Future of Everything. I'm Russ Altman. I'm speaking with Pamela Chen, and we were just starting to talk about viral photographs, recommender algorithms, and really, you had made a vague reference earlier, not so vague, about you're coming to Stanford from Instagram. And I wanted to ask you about that, because here you are at a very exciting, revolutionary platform. What made you say it was time to step back and become a little bit more academic?
Well, I think that what I was realizing in the work that I was doing is that we now have all the tools we need to create and live in a world of our own choosing. Maybe sometimes it's a little disconnected from our collective reality. But in some ways, because I was at Instagram, I understand that it might be inevitable that we got to this point. We were growing these in not just Instagram, but many platforms are humongous. Like they are larger than whole countries and governments. But I think it's important to recognize that machine learning is still relatively new to the world of social media. There are so many questions that aren't even being asked yet. And it's not too late to do that. And so I had that itch to scratch. And so I came to Stanford.
I mean, as an academic, I'm so happy to hear that, because that's why we do academia. And to have somebody come back to the fold, knowing that that's such an important thing to do, is heartwarming. So So like a good academic, let me ask you, what did you decide to focus on in your, because typically when you come to an academic setting, it's about going deep and narrow. So it's not like I'm going to look a little bit at everything. I'm going to do a little bit of a deep dive. Have you decided, or what was your deep dive?
Yes. So I've spent this year studying how digital creators are harnessing AI to go viral, which is, and everyone's like, well, what does that mean? And
Yes.
basically, I've come here to study memes.
Memes. So could you define for, let's say, the over X age group, what's a meme?
Well, there is a much cited definition of meme by Richard Dawkins, which describes it as a unit of cultural information that's spread by imitation.
Okay.
And really, the word meme has become kind of a catch-all phrase for a lot of things these days. It sometimes means something funny. It means the format, a picture with some words on it. It sometimes also refers to the way things spread, the networks. The way that I'm looking at it is through the lens of creators, the people who are creating content that's spread through meme networks.
Interesting. So let me just ask, is something, in order to be a meme, does it have to go viral? Or is it that a meme may go viral, but it may not?
Well, that's an interesting question, because I think that these recommender systems that we've been talking about, while they solve for a problem of scale, they've also created the opportunity for content to go very viral.
Yes.
And the word viral meaning it spreads beyond the scope of the original publisher. So you may have, I don't know how many followers you have, Russ, but you may have, say, 1,000 followers, but you could post something that 1 million people see. And that is an indicator that something is going viral.
And it went way beyond my normal audience.
Correct. And with a meme is a packet of information. It's a way that information can travel. It's a packet of culture. It communicates in its own way. And I believe that it is very much an evolving language in its own right. But you also have people who can create these packets of information to go viral.
So that's their specific intent.
Yes.
And so really, so millions of questions. So I probably should just let you talk, but let me just say, so can you give me an example of why that would be a goal? Is it usually tied to making money?
That's certainly one of the incentives, but I think we could have a whole nother conversation just about incentives on the product side, the creator side, the consumer side. The intention is usually around, it started out just around the lulz, and then it was for a quick laugh or a reaction. You want somebody to, when they see your meme, to immediately like it, share it, follow you, or comment on it.
Okay.
And that's really kind of, these memes are designed to evoke that immediate response. Coincidentally, that is also what the algorithm is looking for. So meme makers are optimizing creatively for the very thing that algorithms are also optimizing for, an immediate actionable response.
Right. So as an artist and a creative, does that cause you pause? Or do you think this is part of the evolution of art and it's not about fighting it or accepting it, it's about this is what it is? So how interventionalist is your attitude, I guess, towards these phenomena that you're describing?
Oh, man. You hit right at the heart of the question for me. It's a very existential question for me. I, as a curator myself, I have these questions about how the role of a curator today, especially a visual curator, changes. And you cannot think about that or ask questions about that without looking at who's doing it really well. And these creators are doing it really, really well. I believe that they have become one of the most successful curators, human curators, if you measure by today's benchmarks, which happen to be around engagement and time spent. And I do think that there's a tendency to kind of use the word meme synonymously with entertainment or humor. But now more than ever, they are a form of viral visual storytelling that is just absolutely exploding as a vehicle for information and connecting with other humans.
And obviously that could include social commentary, commentary for social change, political commentary, commentary for political change. And so then all of a sudden this becomes a little bit more serious and a little bit more impactful to our whole society sense. Now, are you finding, you've been referring to these curators who do it well, are they a type of person? Can I do some kind of Briggs personality and say this is a person who looks like a meme creator? Or, I'm suspecting it's much more complicated than that, but have you seen shared features across the people who are good at this?
I would say that meme creators are not a homogenous group. In some ways, they are. The one thing that I have found they have in common is that they are very attuned to human connection. They are looking for that response in a way that is very human, and yet, ironically, is also what causes them to be so aligned with machine learning at this point.
Yes.
In social media.
Are they able to take advantage of changes? You know, people talk about changing the algorithm. And I'm sure that every now and then Instagram kind of tweaks the algorithm and changes its behavior. I would guess that these folks would be exquisitely sensitive to changes in the algorithm. And are they? And do they adapt quickly? Is that one of their sources of staying power?
Well, there's a lot of misinformation about that, actually, and what brought me here to Stanford was actually, that was one of the starting points, was this perception of what the algorithm was doing. Many creators would say, I know exactly when the algorithm changes. And I'm not so sure that that's what we're really talking about, is not a switch in some line of code. Mm-hmm. What we're talking about is perhaps a shift in behaviors, in human behavior, and what we're reacting to and what we're liking, what we are training the algorithms to show us more of.
That's really fascinating. I totally hear you that the behavioral response to content will change the algorithm just as much, if not more, than actually changing a line of code in the algorithm. And so teasing that apart and thinking about what's the right ways to happen. So in the final minute, what is your vision? Here's a super easy question. What's your vision for the future of recommender systems in the context of the arts and in creative content?
Well, I think, you end on the easy ones. Huh?
It's my specialty.
Well, I do think that it's important to realize that these systems are very new and they are still being designed and redesigned. It's not too late to ask the right questions about why we're doing this and what we're optimizing for. These are powerful predictive systems that are shaping human creativity. They're shaping our behaviors and they're shaping our perception of what is real. And so it really matters that we get this right, because these recommender systems now control our shared visual experiences.
Well, it might have been a hard question, but that was an awesome answer. Thank you very much, Pamela. Thank you for listening to The Future of Everything. I'm Russ Altman. If you missed any of this episode, listen anytime on demand with the SiriusXM app.